Hello and welcome to my next video. Well, in previous videos, we've done a deep dive, if you will, into supply and demand, looking at such things as elasticity on both sides, supply and demand, looking at production costs that's related to supply, looking at uh, consumer preference theory, which is related to the demand side. And so hopefully we now have a firm foundation, if you will, on supply and demand. Now we're going to use a lot of those concepts and look at market structure. This is also known back in the day when I was in graduate school. This is called industrial organization, but let's call it market structure. So why is this important? Well, different firms are going to react differently to changes in market conditions depending on what kind of market structure they're in. So there are two extreme opposites in terms of the market structures. So we're going to define market structure basically by looking at different examples of market structures. We're going to have a total of four, but we're going to look at the two extremes first. One side, one extreme on one side is perfect competition, and the other is monopoly. Now, excuse me if I use the term PC here. I'm not talking about a personal computer or politically correct, but I'm talking about a perfectly competitive market structure. So, no, that's what I'll be talking about in context here if I mention PC and then monopoly. I think most of us have a fairly good understanding of monopoly, at least at the surface level, maybe not so much the PC end of things. So let's jump in and look at what the characteristics are of a perfectly competitive firm in a perfectly competitive industry. First of all, let me kind of remind ourselves about what we're looking at in terms of basic economic assumptions. And I guess this is not so much a reminder as a refresher. So, in economics, we assume that business firms, their purpose is to maximize their profits. And keep in mind that if they have positive profits, they're going to likely expand their production and sales if that's possible. It may not be possible. If they have negative profits, they're certainly not going to expand, but they may just try to hang on. And so if they have negative profits, in other words, losses, then what they'll try to do is minimize their losses. So our basic assumption about business firms is they maximize profits or minimize losses if that is the particular case. All right. Well, let's think about how profits are formed or determined. Profit, I'm going to use the pi symbol for that, is equal to total revenue minus total cost. So the total revenue is nothing more than just total sales. And then we've studied total cost and actually total revenue in previous videos. Some other things, total revenue is just the price of each item times the quantity of each item sold, and then you sum that up. So if we were talking about one particular item, that'd just be price times quantity. If we're talking about summing up a whole bunch, you would have a little Greek sigma symbol before that P times Q. But average revenue is nothing more than total revenue divided by the quantity. And so you can see mathematically that average revenue and the price is exactly the same thing. So in any market structure that we talk about from now on, the demand curve is equal to price is equal to average revenue. So that demand curve or line, if it's linear, we can think of that in three different ways. So again, this is the demand curve, and at a particular point, that also gives us a particular price, and then that's also the average revenue. So that says if we're selling 100 units, then the average revenue is the same thing as the price, which is a tad under $16. Price is $16. Your total revenue would be $16 times 100. Again, it's a little less, but rounded. And so what we're looking at here is $1,600, and that would be total revenue. Average revenue divided be divided by quantity would be dividing right back by the 100, and so notice we'd come out with the same thing as price. All right, so we can also, on the graph, actually calculate it by looking at the area of the rectangle formed by the price and the quantity. So in this case, we're talking about $10 and almost 180. So it'd be almost 1,800 would be total revenue there. This is going to be critical that you can actually calculate these various entities, these various amounts off of a supply and demand curve. In this case, we're just dealing with demand at this point. Okay, now, very, very important concept, marginal revenue. We've run into marginal many times before. But marginal revenue is just when you sell one more unit, how much does that change total revenue by? So marginal revenue is the change, the little triangle sign, delta, means change in. So marginal revenue is change in total revenue divided by the change in quantity. But total revenue is nothing more than price times quantity, recall. And so we can see that if quantity is not changing, then the Q's are going to be constant. And guess what? It's going to be equal to marginal revenue. Now, make sure you understand that I'm saying this is only true about marginal revenue, that it's the same thing as price if the price is not changing. I think I said earlier, the quantity is not changing. It's the price that's not changing. So if the price is constant, then the marginal revenue will be the same thing as price, as you can see here. And recall from our discussion of elasticity that to get the price to be the same, that would be a flat demand curve. And a flat demand curve is perfectly elastic. And so the marginal revenue curve is the same thing as demand, is the same thing as price, is the same thing as average revenue, only if the price isn't changing. Make sure you understand that. Now, to maximize profits, a firm would look at, if I sell one more unit, what's that going to add to my total revenues? That would be my marginal revenue. What increase in total cost will occur as a result of producing and selling one more unit? That would be my marginal cost. Now, if marginal revenue, in other words, if I get a higher amount of revenue than the increase in my cost, then obviously my profits will be going up. On the other hand, if I decide to produce and sell one more unit and it adds more to my cost than it does my revenue, that would be a case where marginal revenue is less than marginal cost, then I wouldn't want to do that. I'd want to back off. And so the only possible combination of marginal revenue and marginal cost where profits are maximized or losses minimized is where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Now, this is critical for the rest of the semester that you get this down. Marginal revenue equals marginal cost is where profits are maximized. So on a graph, we've got the marginal revenue curve. Remember, it's flat. We've got the short run. This is the short run. Marginal cost curve, average total cost curve, and then the one below average total would be average variable. So that's a way in the short run, excuse me, I apologize. That's the way the shape of a typical cost structure is in the short run for a firm. Okay, so now we're going to get more specific about the perfectly competitive firm in a perfectly competitive market structure. So in a PC, if you will, there's a large number of buyers and sellers. They are selling a homogeneous product. What do I mean by that? Well, it's the same product from seller A to seller B to seller C. The closest thing that we can think of in the real world to something like this would be some kind of agricultural product, say like wheat. Now, I know there's lots of varieties of wheat, but basically wheat is wheat. And so farmer A's wheat's going to be about the same as farmer B's and C's and so forth. So that's what we mean by homogeneous product. Then there's also low barriers to entry and or exit. In other words, firms, businesses can easily get into this market. They can easily get out. Okay. Now, as in any market, at the market level, the market price and quantity is determined by market supply and demand. So here we're illustrating a market supply and market demand, and so that's what sets the price. In this case, supply and demand at the market level sets a price of $10 and 180. Again, as you are probably used to me saying, we could add zeros on this to make it more relevant. But this is for the entire market. Now, we're going to look at a typical firm. We're going to call that the representative firm. And they're so small relative to the entire market, and they sell exactly the same product as a farmer, if you want to think of agriculture down the street. Therefore, the firm just has to take whatever the market price is. They are price takers. A firm, a representative firm, a typical firm in a PC is a price taker. They have to take whatever the market supply and demand conditions set as a price. This means that the representative firm sees a perfectly elastic demand curve. So only in this situation, in other words, when we're talking about a PC that fulfills all those characteristics, uh, is this letter combination true. So D equals P equals AR equals MR. Now recall, D equals P equals AR is actually always the case for any market structure. But then that's not going to necessarily be equal to marginal revenue unless it's a PC. So make sure you understand that too.